Welcome back to the Rock Vault, where the amps are always hot. The 1970s gave us legends, but it also gave us unreal rock bands whose brilliance never got the spotlight it deserved. Today, we dust off the vinyl and relive the forgotten anthems that prove rock's hidden giants still echo through time. When people talk about the birth of 70s hard rock, names like Deep Purple and Black Sabbath dominate the conversation. But lurking just beneath that towering shadow was an unreal band called Trapeze, a group whose power and versatility should have placed them among the decade's giants. Emerging from the industrial heart of England, they mixed bluesy swagger, soulful vocals, and heavy guitar riffs into a sound that was both raw and transcendent. Their 1970 album, Medusa, was nothing short of a statement. Here was a band that could groove, roar, and soar all in the same breath. Fronted by the magnetic Glenn Hughes, whose voice carried both grit and gospel-like soul, Trapeze felt destined for stardom. Hughes's bass lines thundered, while Mel Galley's guitar work stitched together riffs that could flatten a stadium and still find room for delicate beauty. Drummer Dave Holland anchored it all with pounding precision, giving the trio a wall of sound that belied their numbers. Songs like Black Cloud and the title track Medusa revealed a band that wasn't afraid to stretch, weaving progressive ambition into blues-driven hard rock. For fans who discovered them in the early 70s, Trapeze felt like a secret you wanted to share, but also keep to yourself. Their concerts were the stuff of whispered legend, sweaty, high-energy affairs where Hughes's vocals could raise goosebumps and Galley's guitar rang out like a clarion call. If you were lucky enough to catch them live, you walked away convinced you'd seen the future of rock. But fate had other plans. In 1973, Hughes was recruited into Deep Purple, and while his career soared, Trapeze never fully recovered from losing their beating heart. The band carried on with new lineups, releasing strong material, but the magic of the original trio became a memory cherished by those who knew. Looking back, Trapeze remain one of the unreal bands of the 70s, a group whose potential rivaled the era's greatest, but whose name slipped through the cracks of history. Their music still stands as proof that sometimes the best treasures of rock are the ones waiting to be rediscovered. When you think of early 70s rock, the conversation often circles around the big names. Deep Purple, yes, Led Zeppelin, but tucked in between those giants was Argent, a band that combined progressive exploration with anthemic hooks in ways that were truly unreal. Founded by keyboardist Rod Argent after leaving the Zombies, the group carried that same melodic sophistication into the new decade, but with a harder, more expansive edge. Their 1972 hit, Hold Your Head Up, gave them a brief taste of success, climbing the charts and earning heavy radio play. But Argent was more than just a one-song wonder. Their music stretched across ambitious prog rock landscapes, layered with soaring Hammond organ, crisp guitar lines from Russ Ballard, and harmonies that drew from both classical roots and raw rock energy. It was cerebral, but still deeply emotional, a balancing act few bands managed as gracefully. Fans who caught them live in the early 70s remember nights when Rod Argent would take the stage and push his organ solos into cosmic territory, leaving crowds awestruck. This was the kind of band that could hypnotize you in one moment with complex musicianship, then have you shouting along the next to a chorus built for arenas. Yet, despite their unreal talent, Argent never reached the sustained superstardom of their peers. Part of it was timing. Progressive rock was just beginning to fracture into extremes, and Argent's balance of accessibility and experimentation made them hard to pin down. Still, for those who grew up in the era, Argent felt like a band you were lucky to stumble across. Maybe it was a scratched vinyl found in the back bins of a record shop, or that moment when Hold Your Head Up blasted from an FM radio at just the right time in your youth. Their songs carried a message of resilience, of pushing forward, that resonated deeply with a generation finding its way in a rapidly changing world. Looking back, Argent may not sit in the pantheon alongside Zeppelin or Floyd, but their contributions remain undeniable. They were proof that the 70s were overflowing with talent. So much that even bands this good could slip through the cracks. For those who remember them, and for those discovering them now, Argent is one of the truly unreal bands of the decade.
All in all, each man in all men, and all men in each man.
In the world of progressive rock, there were giants, bands like Yes, Genesis, and King Crimson, but hidden among them was a group that took experimentation even further. Gentle Giant. Formed in 1970, they were fearless in blending rock with medieval chants, jazz rhythms, and intricate harmonies that felt more like symphonies than songs. Their 1972 album Octopus remains a jaw-dropping example of their craft, weaving together complex arrangements without ever losing that rock edge. Gentle Giant's music wasn't for casual radio listeners. It demanded your attention. Kerry Minier's keyboards darted between baroque flourishes and funky grooves, while Derek Schulman's commanding vocals gave the songs emotional weight. The band often switched instruments mid-song, building a tapestry of sound that was both heady and exhilarating. For many fans, discovering them felt like stepping into a secret society, one where rock could be intellectual, playful, and still hit with power. For those who grew up in the 70s with a turntable spinning in the corner, hearing Gentle Giant for the first time was unforgettable. Maybe it was late at night, headphones on, as the intricate vocal rounds of knots swirled around you like some strange dream. Or maybe it was a buddy passing you a record sleeve with a knowing smile, saying, "You've never heard anything like this." They weren't stadium fillers, but to the kids who wanted to go deeper, Gentle Giant opened doors to new worlds. Part of the reason they never reached superstardom was simple. This music wasn't easy. It challenged you, dared you to follow its twists and turns, and refused to be watered down for radio. In an era when hooks often drove fame, Gentle Giant chose artistry over accessibility. Looking back, that choice might be why they still feel so special. They didn't chase trends. They built their own universe. And for anyone willing to dive in, that universe was breathtaking. Gentle Giant may not have topped the charts, but they remain one of the truly unreal bands of the 70s, a band that proved rock could be as adventurous as any art form on Earth. In the early 70s, the heavy rock scene was exploding, with Black Sabbath, Zeppelin, and Purple writing the rulebook. But alongside them was Budgie, a Welsh power trio whose raw energy and thunderous riffs made them one of the most unreal bands of the decade. They weren't just another hard rock outfit. They were innovators, blazing a trail for what would later become heavy metal. Their 1973 album, Never Turn Your Back on a Friend, showcased that force, with heavy guitars balanced by quirky wit and surprising musical depth. Led by the high-pitched vocals and rumbling bass of Burke Shelley, Budgie's sound hit with a ferocity that belied their small lineup. Tony Borge's guitar riffs were monstrous, sharp, grinding, and unforgettable, while drummer Ray Phillips pounded with a relentless intensity. Songs like Bread Fan and Parents showed their versatility. One moment bone-crushing heaviness, the next a sweeping emotional ballad. They had the riffs, the range, and the daring attitude that should have launched them into superstardom. For the kids who found Budgie in the 70s, usually through word of mouth or a lucky vinyl pick, the experience was unforgettable. Imagine slipping on a pair of headphones late at night, and suddenly hearing Shelley's piercing voice cut through the darkness, while Borge's guitar rattled the walls of your room. If Sabbath gave you doom, and Zeppelin gave you mystique, Budgie gave you raw power and honesty. And yet, despite influencing later metal titans like Metallica, who famously covered Bread Fan, Budgie never got the same recognition. They didn't have the marketing machine, the glamorous image, or the big radio singles to keep them in the public eye. What they had was grit, innovation, and a loyal cult following that still swears by their records today. Looking back, Budgie feels like one of the great what-if stories of rock. If timing and exposure had been kinder, They might sit beside Sabbath and Purple as household names. Instead, they remain one of the unreal bands of the 70s, a band whose music deserves to be cranked up, rediscovered, and celebrated for the force it truly was. When people think of 70s rock, names like Aerosmith, Kiss, or Sabbath quickly come to mind. But lurking just beyond the spotlight was Blue Oyster Cult, a band that blended mystery, menace, and melody in ways that felt unreal. Formed in Long Island, they crafted a sound that walked the tightrope between hard rock muscle and cerebral, almost literary depth. Their 1974 release, Secret Treaties, remains one of the most compelling records of the decade, an album critics hailed for its dark atmosphere and precision musicianship. Blue Oyster Cult had it all. Dual guitar attacks from Buck Dharma and Eric Bloom, swirling organ textures and lyrics that pulled from science fiction, occult imagery, and shadowy storytelling. They weren't content with simple riffs and choruses. They wanted to create worlds. Songs like Career of Evil or Dominance and Submission felt like secret codes, the kind of tracks that made fans lean in closer, searching for hidden meaning. And yet, all of this experimentation was wrapped in sleek, powerful rock that could still move a crowd. For fans who stumbled upon them in the mid-70s, Blue Oyster Cult felt like discovering a secret society. Picture this: a friend sliding a vinyl across the table at a late-night hangout, whispering, "You've got to hear this band." You drop the needle, and suddenly your room fills with riffs that sound both futuristic and sinister. Like a glimpse into rock's darker underbelly, it was intoxicating and unforgettable. Despite their incredible talent and occasional brushes with mainstream success, Blue Oyster Cult never quite received the recognition of their peers. Sure, they'd later score big with Don't Fear the Reaper, but even that massive hit overshadowed just how diverse and daring their catalog was in the 70s. They weren't just writing songs, they were crafting myths, giving rock fans a passport into strange and thrilling new territories. Today, Blue Oyster Cult stand as one of the unreal bands of the 70s, a group that deserves far more credit for pushing rock into unexpected realms. Their music still has the power to surprise, to unsettle, and to ignite, proving that true cult legends never really fade away. By the mid-70s, most casual fans had already moved on from the British invasion bands of the 60s. But one group that kept evolving in unreal ways was the Pretty Things. Starting as raw rhythm and blues rebels, they morphed into psychedelic pioneers before finally embracing glam-infused hard rock in the 70s. Their 1974 album Silk Torpedo captured this transformation perfectly, with big riffs, lush production, and the swagger of a band that refused to be boxed in. Led by the gritty vocals of Phil May and the inventive guitar of Dick Taylor, the Pretty Things created music that was both edgy and elegant. They carried a streetwise toughness, but layered it with an experimental edge, giving them a sound that felt dangerous yet refined. In many ways, they should have been standing shoulder to shoulder with Bowie or Mott the Hoople, but fate kept them on the margins of mass success. For those who did discover them, the Pretty Things were unforgettable. Fans remember sneaking their records onto turntables at parties, the opening chords sparking that rush of recognition among the few who knew, this band is special. Their music carried the wild spirit of the 60s into the 70s, while still sounding fresh and relevant. It was the soundtrack for kids who wanted something a little more daring than the radio hits everyone else was spinning. Despite being the first British band signed to Led Zeppelin's Swan Song label, the Pretty Things never fully broke through in America. They remained a cult favorite, beloved by those who understood just how vital their music was to the evolution of rock. Looking back, their career stands as proof that not all legends find the spotlight. Some, like the Pretty Things, remain hidden treasures, unreal bands whose influence far outweighed their fame.
Tonight we sleep on
on silken sheets.
Most people remember Procol Harum for their 1967 classic A Whiter Shade of Pale, but their story didn't end there. In the 70s, they transformed into one of the most unreal rock bands of the decade, melding classical elegance with hard rock grit in a way few others dared. Their 1973 release Grand Hotel captured that blend beautifully. Sweeping orchestration, soulful vocals, and guitar lines that gave the grandeur real bite. Gary Brooker's voice carried both sophistication and raw emotion, while guitarist Mick Grabham added a harder edge that kept the music firmly in rock territory. Unlike many of their peers, Procol Harum weren't content to repeat formulas. One track could feel like a ballroom waltz scored for a cathedral, the next a bluesy rocker built for smoky clubs. This willingness to take risks kept their sound fresh, though it also made them harder for mainstream audiences to pin down. For fans in the 70s, putting on a Procol Harum record was an experience. Maybe you remember spinning Grand Hotel on a rainy afternoon, letting the lush strings and dramatic piano wash over you. It was music that made your living room feel like a theater. Your stereo transformed into a stage. In an era defined by experimentation, Procol Harum proved rock could be both intellectual and heartfelt. Despite critical acclaim and a devoted following, they never reached the same mass recognition as contemporaries, like Yes or ELP. Their sophistication sometimes worked against them in the arena-driven world of 70s rock. Yet today, revisiting those records reminds us just how bold and unique they truly were. Procol Harum remain one of the decade's unreal bands, artists who dared to blur the line between high art and rock and roll, and in doing so, left behind music that still resonates with anyone willing to listen closely. In the shifting landscape of early 70s rock, one band stood out for its dark power and fearless creativity: Atomic Rooster. Formed by organist Vincent Crane after leaving the crazy world of Arthur Brown, the band combined heavy riffs, haunting keyboards, and progressive ambition into something truly unreal. Their 1970 album Death Walks Behind You showcased a band unafraid to dive into the shadows, mixing hard rock grit with eerie atmospheres that still feel chilling today. What made Atomic Rooster so special was Crane's towering Hammond organ, which often drove the music as fiercely as the guitar. Tracks swung between pounding, doom-laden heaviness and delicate, almost jazzy interludes, giving their sound an unpredictable edge. John Ducan's guitar work added muscle and menace, while drummer Paul Hammond's thunderous playing made the trio feel far larger than life. They didn't just dabble in heaviness. They helped lay the groundwork for what heavy metal would soon become. For the fans who stumbled upon Atomic Rooster in the 70s, their music felt like a secret doorway. Imagine dropping the needle on Death Walks Behind You in a dimly lit bedroom, the lights low, and suddenly being swept into a storm of organ swells and razor-sharp riffs. This wasn't background music. It demanded your full attention. It was the kind of record you played for your closest friends, waiting for their eyes to widen as the sound engulfed them. Despite their unreal talent, Atomic Rooster never broke into the mainstream. Lineup changes, shifting musical trends, and their darker style made it hard for them to capture radio play. But for those who knew, they were unforgettable. They embodied the daring spirit of the 70s, when rock wasn't afraid to take risks and explore the unknown. Today, Atomic Rooster remains a cult legend, one of those bands whose influence outstripped their fame. Their sound still resonates with anyone drawn to the heavier, moodier side of rock. In the pantheon of 70s music, they stand as one of the unreal bands that deserved far more recognition than history gave them. In the pantheon of 70s rock, some bands seemed born for the stage, their music built to make cars rumble and stadiums roar. Foghat was one of those unreal groups, a British band that carried blues rock into the stratosphere with volume, groove, and a stubborn refusal to slow down. Their 1975 album Fool for the City was pure adrenaline, a record stacked with swagger, thumping bass, and guitar lines that practically dripped gasoline. Foghat's sound was both heavy and irresistibly fun. Lonesome Dave Peverett's gritty vocals sat perfectly over Rod Price's searing slide guitar, a combination that gave them a signature tone few bands could match. Songs like the title track and their eternal anthem Slow Ride turned heads with their driving rhythms and arena-ready hooks. This was music that wasn't meant to be dissected. It was meant to be blasted from the speakers of muscle cars and boom boxes, a soundtrack for freedom on the open road. For fans in the mid-70s, Foghat felt like summer itself. You can almost picture it now. Windows down, the smell of hot asphalt rising, and Slow Ride rattling the dashboard as you cruised with friends. Their music had that uncanny ability to bring people together, to make everyday moments feel like rock concerts in miniature. Yet despite their energy, Foghat often lived in the shadow of bigger blues rock acts like ZZ Top and Aerosmith. They scored hits, yes, but never quite earned the recognition their talent deserved. Maybe it was because critics dismissed them as too simple, or maybe because they leaned so unapologetically into good-time rock when the industry was chasing prog epics and concept albums. But simplicity can be powerful, and Foghat knew exactly how to make music that felt alive in your bones. Looking back, Foghat embodied what made 70s rock so unreal: authenticity, volume, and a sense of joy that never needed validation from the charts. Their songs still roar across classic rock radio, proof that even if they weren't crowned as kings, they left behind a legacy impossible to ignore. Among the towering giants of progressive rock, one band often overlooked but truly unreal in their artistry was Camel. Formed in England in 1971, Camel took the adventurous spirit of prog and infused it with warmth, melody, and an almost cinematic beauty. Their 1974 album Mirage stands as one of the most elegant prog rock statements of the decade. Lush, intricate, and emotional without ever feeling bloated. Camel's sound was built around the fluid guitar work of Andrew Latimer, whose playing carried both technical brilliance and deep emotion. Paired with Peter Bardens's shimmering keyboards, the band created music that felt like a journey through landscapes both real and imaginary. Unlike some prog contemporaries who leaned into excess, Camel had a gift for restraint, weaving complexity with clarity. Their songs could soar into extended passages, yet remain grounded in melody, making them accessible even to those who weren't die-hard prog fans. For fans who discovered them in the 70s, Camel's music felt like an escape. Picture lying back with headphones, the lights low, and letting Mirage carry you away. Through dreamlike guitar lines, hushed atmospheres, and sudden bursts of energy, it was rock as meditation and adventure, a soundtrack for both quiet reflection and restless imagination. Despite their brilliance, Camel never achieved the fame of Yes, Genesis or Pink Floyd. They didn't have flashy personas or arena rock spectacle. Their music spoke softly, but carried profound depth. In the US, distribution challenges and limited promotion kept them from reaching wider audiences, leaving them as a hidden treasure mostly cherished by dedicated fans and collectors. Looking back, Camel was one of the unreal bands of the 70s, a group whose music rewarded those who sought it out. Their blend of emotional resonance and technical skill deserves far more recognition than history has given. And for those who return to Mirage today, the sound is still as breathtaking as it was when the needle first dropped.
He was the wizard of 1,000 kings.
When we talk about the sound of the 1970s, the conversation often turns to Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath, the holy trinity of hard rock and proto-metal. But right alongside them, carving out their own unreal legacy, was Uriah Heep. Formed in London in 1969, the band built a sound that was both heavy and mystical, fusing thundering riffs with soaring harmonies and fantasy-laden lyrics. Their 1972 release, Demons and Wizards, became a defining statement, showcasing just how ambitious and imaginative rock could be. At the center of it all was Mick Box's wah-drenched guitar and David Byron's dynamic vocals, which could swing from tender balladry to operatic wails in a heartbeat. Add in Ken Hensley's swirling Hammond organ, and you had a band capable of creating entire universes within a single song. Tracks like Easy Livin' hit with immediate punch, built for blasting out of car radios, while epics like Circle of Hands and Paradise Chant the Spell painted vast emotional landscapes that belonged as much to the imagination as to the stage. For the fans who discovered Uriah Heep in the early 70s, their music was like stepping into another realm. Picture yourself in a dimly lit basement, the record spinning, and those layered vocal harmonies filling the room like a cathedral. It wasn't just rock. It felt like a ceremony, a gathering of sound and spirit that spoke to the restless, searching energy of a generation. Heep concerts were the same: lights, smoke, and a band delivering each note like it was carved from stone. For many teenagers of the time, this was their first brush with the epic and the otherworldly in rock music. Yet, despite their unreal talent and devoted fan base, Uriah Heep often found themselves dismissed by critics. They were labeled too theatrical or accused of borrowing too heavily from their peers. But ask the fans who clutched those records close, and you'll hear a different story of a band that mattered, that provided escape, adventure, and power when the world felt heavy. While they sold millions of albums worldwide and toured relentlessly, they never earned the critical recognition their peers enjoyed. Looking back, that lack of critical acclaim almost adds to their mystique. Uriah Heep were never built for the critics. They were built for the fans, for the kids who wanted rock that could shake the walls and still carry them into dreamlike worlds. Uriah Heep was a revelation, and today, Demons and Wizards still stands tall as proof of just how unreal this band truly was. And there you have it, some of the most unreal rock bands of the 70s, groups that may not have claimed the spotlight, but whose music still echoes with passion, grit, and imagination. These were the hidden gems spinning on turntables, blasting from car radios, and living on in the memories of those golden years. Which of these bands takes you back the most? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing your stories. If you enjoyed this journey, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, keep the vinyl spinning.